and return and recognize the ranking member of the task force, Mr. Vargas, for 5 minutes for his questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and again, thank all the witnesses here. I believe that all of you, when you spoke of the independence of the Fed. I think, Mr. Pollack, not to put words in your mouth, yours was that it shouldn't be independent of the Congress. But I don't think anyone mentioned that it should not be independent of the President. Does anyone believe that the Fed should not be independent of the President, that in fact the President should be interfere in monetary policy? Mr. Pollack, go ahead, sir.
I can comment, Congressman,
Yes.
if you like. I think, in fact, the Fed always exists in a network of presidential power, presidential policy, and presidential politics. That is a fact, and it applies to all presidents and all Federal Reserves.
So there's the general
all time.
sense that.
However, I'm sorry.
But so yeah, I mean, I wouldn't argue about that. That I wouldn't argue against you that said that in the general sense, of course, there's always politics. But does anyone think that the President should be able to interfere in the monetary policy itself?
What I have been
Should the Fed be independent of the President? Let me give somebody. I gave you a chance. Let me go ahead, sir.
I think this is very clear. The constitutional authority is with the Congress. The Congress has created the Fed to execute on that authority for monetary policy, and the Congress gave the president a small role in nominating people for the Board of Governors, subject to the Senate's confirmation. That's it. That's the limit.
Thank you, Mr. Arment.
It doesn't really make a lot of sense for giving 14-year terms, staggered terms, and to do that at the same time. Look, the FOMC was first created in 1933, and Senate confirmed appointees only came voting members in 1935. It doesn't really make sense to have a sort of an ability for the president to easily fire those members if you were picking 14-year terms, because then you could just reset the slate anytime there's a new president.
That's right.
And that's really just bad for stable monetary policy, stable interest rates, stable prices, if we're going to have that kind of turnover.
Yeah, I think that that's fairly clear. I mean, we've seen that before. I mean, we've seen when the president has interfered. I don't think it's gone well here in the United States. Certainly there's the case with Nixon. And I don't think it's gone well across the world. I mean, I think we saw it also in Turkey. I mean, I just don't think it works well when you have this short political gain by a president interfering in monetary policy. I think it's a bad idea, and that's, I think, what we're seeing today, or at least an attempt at that, and I already read off some of the comments, but they would also have then the president attempting to fire Lisa Cook illegally, I think. In fact, that's what the courts have decided so far. So again, I'm glad that we don't have great disagreement on that, but we do have disagreement on the dual mandate, and I think we have to look at that in the last minute and 50 seconds. The dual mandate's interesting because I think, Mr. Arment, you said it very interestingly. That is the only real reason right now, justifiably, to reduce the interest rate, which the president wants, is because of what we're seeing in the employment sector. Is that not the case?
Yes, I mean, if you're looking for the reason to cut rates that's credible, it's that labor market activity is slowing. Hiring is pretty soft right now. Employment rates are lower on an age-adjusted basis from a year ago. Yes, there's obviously a lot of volatility and revisions in the non-farm payrolls data, but in terms of just pure jobs report and what you see from it, this is some of the slowest job growth we've seen in a jobs report in quite some time outside of recessions. So we have seen a slowing labor market. That might have some impacts on consumer spending and, as a result, maybe future inflation. But the real reason, if you're going to cut rates right now, is not because of inflation. Inflation itself, policy rules, standard policy rules that conservatives and more liberal former
Right, if you're
FOMC
trying to
members-
get it down to 0 or to 2, you wouldn't cut. But you know, the reason I want to say that is because it does seem that my friends on the other side are working against the president in this, in that they want to do away with the dual mandate, the employment aspect, and yet that is what is justifying the rate cuts. And that's what the president wants. So again, and I'm not going to go through the history because I don't have the time of why the employment mandate is so important, but it's because most Americans experience their livelihood through a job. They don't, most of them don't live off of Wall Street. They don't. And that's why it's so important to make sure that there is full employment. With that, I yield back with the second.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time.